Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Tayo Runchaway, and I'm the Intelligent Automation Strategy Lead for Versafile. And I'm joined here this afternoon with Mitch Simon, who's the Global CTO of Energy and Utilities, Data and AI with the IBM Corporation. We're going to talk to you today about the 7 pillars of intelligent automation, and specifically leveraging AI and intelligent automation in the utility sector. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. The AI revolution is bigger than the invention of fire. It's a pretty significant statement. Those words were recently uttered by Google CEO Sundar Pichai, and that would seem to imply that AI is going to be a pretty big factor in society and in business. And yet, in a recent McKinsey survey of almost 2,400 organizations from around the globe, various sizes and cross-industry, it indicated that only 29% have a roadmap clearly prioritizing AI initiatives linked to business value. 34% had senior management that were fully aligned and committed to the organization's AI strategy. And only 17% had a clearly defined AI vision and strategy. Now, given the potential significance that AI will play in business over the next few years, these numbers seem concerningly low. So what is the state of AI? Let's have a quick look at some AI milestones in history and see where we're at. So going back to May 1997, in what was called the match that changed history, IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov, who was then the reigning world chess champion. And then in February 2011, IBM Watson beat Ken Jennings and Brad Ruder on Jeopardy, who were the longest reigning and most money-winning players. And then in March 2016, Google's DeepMind AlphaGo beat Go champion Lee Sedol, and then in May 2017, beat the world's top Go player Ke Jie. And then in September 2021, IBM and Promare launched the world's first fully autonomous ship to duplicate the Pilgrim's voyage across the Atlantic. And then later in 2021, the android Sophia, the world's first android, gained citizenship from Saudi Arabia and declared she wanted to have a baby. Now, in fairness, a little bit of a marketing stunt there, but later on in 2021, Sophia's sister was also launched to help with the pandemic.
Team behind celebrity humanoid robot Sophia is launching a new prototype, Grace, targeted at the healthcare market and designed to interact with the elderly and those isolated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Dressed in a blue nurse's uniform, Grace has Asian features, collar-length brown hair, and a thermal camera in her chest to take your temperature and measure your responsiveness. She uses artificial intelligence to diagnose a patient and can speak English, Mandarin, and Cantonese.
So we use AI, perhaps not quite as creepy as that, all the time, and we may not even be aware of it. Every time we Google something, we are using AI. In fact, there's an interesting documentary called The Social Dilemma that goes into great detail about how our personal information and our prior searches tailor the information that we receive back using ML algorithms. Every time we use GPS in our cars, every time we use Siri, Alexa, or Google Assist, even Bixby, we are using AI. Every time you travel by air, computer vision is helping detect items of concern. Every time you check your email, AI is keeping junk from your inbox. Have you had a CT scan, an MRI, or an X-ray lately? Thousands of images fed into training sets allowed the doctor to more accurately identify or rule out disease in a fraction of the time. Amazon and Netflix regularly suggest to you what you might like to buy or what you might like to watch based on your past purchases or movies, and compare those to others who fit a similar profile. In fact, Netflix says that 80% of its watched content is based on algorithmic recommendations. Now, I'm not really sure what this says about my viewing habits. I did enjoy The Last Castle, but almost 2 decades ago. I have no interest in watching The Ice Road. and haven't really caught on to manifest. So we'll see. Anyway, regardless of your point of view, AI is all around us, and it frankly is here to stay. And so while it's easy to highlight specific applications as we just have that surround us, most businesses are still struggling with how to move from the cool to the transformative. And so how do we tap into that potential? How do we put AI to work in a way that will bring demonstrable business benefit? What does that journey look like? And what are some of the things that organizations need to consider before embarking on this journey? A number of years ago, as we launched our intelligent automation practice, we built out an intelligent automation maturity model. And while I appreciate this is a bit of an eye chart, we're not going to take you through each of the cells, but the real takeaway was that as we've talked to clients across North America, most organizations land somewhere in the 2 to 2.25 level. And when we compare that to organizations like portions of Amazon and other advanced organizations, they sit squarely at 4, even reaching into 5. And so the real takeaway here is that the move to go from 2 to 4 is a 3 to 5 year journey. And that assumes that you have senior level support and you have business area champions to continue driving it forward in the organization. So if you're going to embark on that journey to enterprise-enabled AI, what does that entail? Well, the first one is to discover the possibilities. The potential for innovation is enormous. However, that requires that the C-suite be bought in and have AI as part of their formal business strategy. And as we looked at in the McKinsey survey earlier, 17 to 34%, depending on how you measured that, have senior level executives and have it as a formal part of their business strategy. And so at senior levels, you need to be able to envision an AI future, an AI-enabled future. And so given this isn't just a switch that we flip overnight and AI gets applied, we need to really think about how we're going to do this, and it requires a well thought out approach. And so we need to establish a process to deploy AI in the organization. Likewise, just as Google and Siri have changed the way we interact with the world around us, AI will change the way we interact in the workplace. And so we need to prepare our people to work differently. And then finally, and frankly, this could be an entire presentation by itself, AI transparency is key, and you need to determine your stance on AI ethics to ensure that bias is removed, and that will help keep you clear of ethical and even legal issues. So we talk about AI and then we talk about intelligent automation, and we almost use them interchangeably. So what is the difference? And as many of you are probably aware, artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science, and it includes the things on the screen. And really, when we take AI and we start to infuse it or blend it into process automation technologies, we end up with intelligent automation. And we go one step farther. Since businesses don't buy technology, or at least they shouldn't, they should be buying business outcomes. Our position is that any intelligent automation solution has to deliver and improve client experience. It needs to reduce errors, minimize human involvement, and or reduce transactional costs. So the AI ladder, because it all starts with data, is a guiding strategy for organizations to transform their business by connecting data and AI. And while it's depicted as a ladder, it's important to note that these aren't necessarily steps that have to be followed sequentially, and in many cases can run parallel depending on the nature and the ROI of the use case. The key is that the data needs to be clean and organized, typically referred to as information architecture. In fact, a bit of a tongue twister for you, there's no IA without AI and there's no AI without IA. So there's no intelligent automation without artificial intelligence, but there's no artificial intelligence without information architecture. And that really is where the rubber hits the road. All of those innovations and milestones that we've talked about have led us to here. Now, how can we apply this into our work world and get business benefit? So the idea of this framework is to build a bridge between the business and technologists, between frontline workers and IT professionals. And so the 7 pillars which are not rocket science: ingestion, interpretation, orchestration, decisions, recommendations, execution, and optimization. Those 7 pillars are capabilities, business capabilities. Yes, they're supported by technology, but by focusing on the business capabilities element, it stops us from jumping to the tech and losing sight of the business outcomes. And so this journey really starts with automating ingestion, orchestration, and execution. In other words, getting information into a digital format and into the organization, routing it around the organization, and finally doing something with it. But the real potential starts once we apply AI. And so we think about knowledge workers today, they're often inundated with information, digital noise that creates bottlenecks and delays, and all those things most organizations and knowledge workers would like to be elevated out of, and have streamlining and improvement brought to the process. And so this is really where the gold mine of opportunity lies in intelligent decisions, either reducing or augmenting the human in the loop. But when we talk about reducing the human in the loop, that's also where people start to get fearful and they start to express concern about losing their job or robots taking over. And so let's have a little bit of fun with that for a second. Why the human in the loop, frankly, isn't going anywhere anytime soon. This is an actual book, and the title of the book is "There Are Two Errors in the Title of This Book." Now, while AI continues to become faster and more accurate and more useful within the business context, the following demonstration is going to show you that there's no risk of most knowledge workers in most companies being replaced anytime soon. So there's 2 errors. Give you just a moment. You'll probably find the first error very quickly, but what is the second error? The second error is the statement that there are 2 errors, when in fact there is only one grammatical error. The other is an error of logic. It's inferring that there are 2 errors, but the inference is actually incorrect, and therefore it is an error. Now, if you think about how much that just hurts your head, then you can feel confident that computers are a long way away from being able to replace most knowledge workers in your average organization. The ability to infer that is just something that AI is currently not capable of, and will be quite some time before it is. And in fact, good intelligent design aims to reduce reliance on humans for mundane and low-value tasks, known as reducing the human in the loop, and also to improve the value of information that is presented to workers, or augmenting the human in the loop, maximizing their time and helping them to make better informed decisions. And most of us would like to be freed from mundane work so we could focus on high-value activities. Where both the challenge and the opportunity lies. How do we identify appropriate use cases? And particularly if we are responsible for a business area and we're not tech savvy or we're not technologists, how do we figure out where we could apply AI within our business process? And so we tend to use what we call an intelligent automation use case funnel, which, again, not rocket science, but it starts with ideation. So innovation is born of necessity, or as someone put a few months ago, which I really like, innovation is born of irritation. And so sometimes it emerges from the simple question, isn't there a better way to do this? And surprisingly, that single question can often drive tremendous frontline engagement, observation, and suggestions. And so, isn't there a better way to do this? How about, why does this take so long? Why can't the system tell me where this is at? Oh, this is mind-numbingly repetitive. We can't possibly get through all of this in time. This backlog is ridiculous. We're constantly missing our internal and or external SLAs. Any of these statements or questions drive an opportunity to look from an ideation perspective at, is this a great place to apply intelligent automation? And then we move to definition, measurement, and analysis. So how big is the problem? Is it unique to one business area or plant, or is it enterprise-wide? How much is it costing the company? What is the cost of doing nothing? What is the required payback? And what regulations might be affected? Is the area the business area or the company ready? Is the data ready? Is the information architecture ready? Are senior execs bought in, and do they know what to expect? Do they understand the investment? Do they understand the payback? Do they understand, what this is supposed to deliver in terms of demonstrable business value? And so does this align with our corporate initiatives and strategy? All of that needs to be analyzed in order to determine, just because it's a good idea doesn't mean it's a good idea to actually implement in your particular organization. And then we move to implementation. What business capabilities are required? What technologies support those capabilities? Can we leverage existing technological investments that we've made inside the organization? What about organizational change management? And then we move to management of the data and the solution. So the ongoing care and feeding of the data. And that should ultimately deliver improved algorithms, increased ROI, and an improved client experience. And we also want to glean additional insights from the data and or the process as we look at tweaking the algorithms and the models to return better results. And then finally, we get to benefits realization. So we shouldn't be doing any of this if ultimately we can't achieve the business benefits that we set out to achieve. And so we want improved business outcomes. We want more accurate prediction and forecasting, streamlined processes, which translates to reduced cost, enabling new lines of business and paths to market, which translates to greater profits or a larger share of your client's wallet, and then reduced reliance on the human in the loop, and finally, freeing employees from low-value work. So an example of this is a real customer scenario. They have a cogeneration plant, and this is their situation. They have gas-fired turbines and boilers, and they produce both electricity and steam. They have meters and sensors that feed a complex system for managing output, demand, and billing. That data all feeds into the plant historian, which is really a very large database and secondary spreadsheets. And there's numerous data pulls every day that's pulled into secondary and tertiary spreadsheets and databases. And then there's a line-by-line review to determine if there's missing sensor data, if there's variance beyond the normal threshold. And once it's cleansed and normalized, then accurate billing and reporting can take place. And this takes roughly 1 FTE to complete this work. So some insightful team members looked at this process and they said, isn't there a better way to do this? Like, couldn't we use technology and automation to help us? And so that drives 2 questions. The first question is there an opportunity to infuse AI into this process and thereby free resources to work on higher value work? And the answer is absolutely. The second question is, does this use case drive enough value to invest in intelligent automation? And the answer to that is, it depends. And that's really the next part of the process, the definition, measurement, and analysis. And so if they have 17 plants and this occurs 17 times and there's 17 or more FTEs involved, that's a very different outcome, obviously, than if they have 17 plants and every plant is different, or only 4 of the plants have the same process. So could they actually standardize the process? All of those questions need to go into that definition, measurement, and analysis in order to answer the question, is there enough value to create demonstrable business outcomes from the application of intelligent automation? So if we loop this back to our 7 pillars, we can easily see how that process maps back to these capabilities. So ingestion, there's an ingestion of sensor and meter data. There's interpretation of stream flows and determine variance. There's a decisions around, is the data within tolerance? Is there missing or invalid data? Recommendations, if the results are beyond the threshold, propose an action based on other variables. As an example, should steam be sold or traded? Execution, various triggers and actions, including billing and the update of the plant historian. And then finally, optimization, both for asset usage as well as forecasting and prediction of consumption based on weather data and other variables. And so all of these things allow us to look at the scenario or the use case and decide, should we tackle all 7 of these? Should we tackle ingestion or decisions? And so that again will go into the analysis, but what it helps us do is break down the problem into business capabilities and decide where and how we should tackle those, and frankly, if it makes sense. So with that, I'm going to ask Mitch to take us through a few real-world use cases from E&U globally and figure out and see how other clients are tapping into the potential of AI. Mitch?
Thanks, Tayo. Okay, so let's get right into it. Is anybody else hearing a echo?
I think you're all good now, Mitch.
All right, thank you. So let's talk about what's happening in the industry first. There are disruptive forces that are shaping the industry. You may have heard about the 4Ds. Decarbonization is, of course, all the rage today, and being able to produce more sustainable energy. Decentralization is this notion that power plants are becoming more distributed, right? So we've got wind farms, we've got solar farms, we've got battery storage that's being deployed in the field. And so these energy sources now are truly distributed. Digital technologies, we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. And then democratization is really about trust and transparency that is necessary in order to help us achieve those decarbonization goals by allowing third parties and new participants in the energy ecosystems. And in fact, ecosystems are growing in importance in terms of the ability for new players to come into the market to help aggregate different energy sources, to provide new sensors, to provide incentives and settlements associated with bringing new energy sources onto the grid. We're also seeing a change and a disruption from a customer perspective. Customers are most interested now in clean energy resources. They're interested in home efficiency alternatives, electronic vehicles, rooftop solar, and they want to also participate and share excess energy back onto the grid and be compensated for it. So digital engagement for customers is going to be a key initiative. And then finally, we're seeing incredible investments in the grid itself, and this is necessary in order to bring more renewable energy onto the grid and to be able to store that energy and make it available when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. And in spite of all these disruptive forces, the utilities still have to deliver safe and reliable energy to the communities that they serve. And so they have their everyday challenges above and beyond decarbonization. Starting off with the aging asset infrastructure, where a lot of assets have been deployed into the grid, into the field, that are way beyond their planned lifespan. And so there's going to be, a refurbishment or replacement of critical assets in the infrastructure. And at the same time, there's a transitioning workforce where utility workers who are responsible for those assets are starting to retire, and they're retiring in droves. So we're not talking about 5 or 10% of the workforce, but we're talking about 30 to 40% of the workforce, and that's significant. We've also seen extreme weather threaten the operations of the utility, and we're seeing that across the globe. And it's getting more and more difficult to keep the lights on when these storms hit. Going over to energy systems, we've talked about this need to increase renewable energy into the grid, but now there's a conundrum. As part of the decarbonization effort, there's electrification of transportation and buildings, and this is actually going to increase demand. It will increase demand for electricity. We talked briefly a moment ago about customers. Customers want to be more engaged. They want sustainable options. They also want to interact with the utility much the way they interact with their banks and their retail stores, online stores, right? So it's all through the phone. To be able to get service through the phone and not have to necessarily pick up the phone and call somebody and speak to somebody. At the same time, due to the pandemic, we've seen an increase in calls coming into the call center, and then the utilities are looking for ways to reduce agent handling time to address the increase in call volume. And then across the enterprise, utilities are always under pressure to improve operational efficiencies and reduce costs. This is commonly referred to as OpEx takeout. At the same time, as renewable energy becomes more common, as new regulations come online to address, these new energy resources, utilities have to react and respond to this regulation. So how are utilities responding to these disruptive forces and challenges? It's really around digitization. They are deploying more sensors onto the grid. They're working with their equipment suppliers who are also embedding sensors now into the equipment. And all those sensors are giving off a lot of data that can be applied to AI to understand the health and risk of those assets. We're also seeing digitization efforts around customers and workforce. So having a conversational AI with natural language processing and understanding, along with automation, can improve the customer experience. But it's also being used for the utility workers in order to assist them in their day-to-day operations. And then finally, in the grid, there's going to be a need to more rapidly orchestrate and integrate these distributed energy resources. So AI and machine learning, and most importantly, automation, are going to be increasingly leveraged to ensure that the energy management systems are operating optimally. So let's go through some example use cases across the utility landscape. We're seeing a lot of interest in remote visual inspection. And so this is essentially using visual recognition technology or computer vision technology to identify anomalies in the assets themselves. And we're doing this in the substations through fixed cameras, through thermal cameras, but also through drones. And most recently, Boston Dynamics, we have a partnership with them to bring Spot the robot for unintended operations and leveraging Spot to improve worker safety in the substation, for example. We're also seeing high interest in asset performance management. So leveraging disparate data sources, both structured and unstructured, along with weather data, and then applying AI and machine learning to understand the health and risk of those assets, but also to provide prescriptive maintenance guidance to engineers, to maintenance managers, to maintenance workers in order to improve the health and reliability of those assets. And then we're seeing AI, conversational AI, applied to field workers, right, who are out there in the field and may not be as experienced as those that came before them. And so they need help, they need assistance. And they're using conversational AI to understand the best approach to solving a problem, to performing a repair or a refurbishment. And it's helping field workers reduce mean time to repair and improving their first-time fix rates, and also improving their safety profile. Utilities are also using machine learning and advanced weather data and historical consumption data to understand the load forecast and to accurately identify peak demand. And this is critical because it's expensive to call up a generator to bring more energy on the grid. We also know that renewables are intermittent and we can't always rely on them. So identifying peak demand is important to be able to initiate those most impactful peak avoidance strategies. We're also seeing AI and ML applied to state estimation of the grid in order to help planners plan maintenance activities around their renewable infrastructure. And so this scenario planning can really help utilities, in this case, transmission operators, to reduce risks associated with intermittent energy supply. And then to address what can be done regarding climate-related storm events, we have an outage prediction solution that leverages high-resolution weather data and to give a probabilistic prediction to the utility potential storm impact on customers and assets within the grid. And so with this storm outage prediction application, we can help the utility mobilize their workforce and in advance of the storm in order to improve the storm response. From a customer perspective, we've, I mentioned earlier that conversational AI provides a superior customer experience, allowing the customer to basically interact with the utility in the channel of their choice. It could be through an agent. It could also be through a self-service portal, like on the web. And when the customer is interacting with the utility, more and more they're interested in very difficult questions around what I call green advocacy, right? So, what are those efficiency upgrades? Who do I call to get rooftop solar installed at my home? What does behind the meter readings mean? What about an EV charging station in my garage? All of those customer preferences are opportunities for utilities. And so we're seeing them apply machine learning to be able to target additional services to their customers. And then demand response is a key initiative at every utility. Demand response essentially is looking at, how can a customer participate in reducing consumption during peak demand events. And this, of course, is critical when everybody's running their air conditioner or running their electric heaters all at the same time. That could create instability in the grid. So using machine learning and various demographic data to identify who is most likely to participate in a demand response program. Looking across enterprise operations, process mining is one of the hot topics these days for all industries, all businesses. As it relates to utilities, process mining really is a tremendous opportunity to interrogate applications, identify inefficient processes, and then recommend which processes to re-engineer or automate. And for automation, having an AI-based solution that automates repetitive tasks that could free up human capital to focus on higher value activities is a key initiative that we're seeing all the time. And then finally, we're seeing, because of the regulatory frameworks that are constantly changing, we're seeing incredible risk to operations, whether it's from storms, whether it's from a cyber attack, and the increasing complexity of compliance. A GRC, or governance risk compliance solution that has embedded AI, can help a utility more efficiently understand the state of risk across their operations. So how are utilities leveraging this data, and what kind of business outcomes are they going to get? Let's do a quick survey here. So I'm going to pick a couple on each of these slides. Starting off here in asset operations, Red Electrica is a fantastic example of a utility in Spain that has invested heavily in intelligent maintenance for their substations. So we're talking about, substation transformers and circuit breakers initially. And they're using IoT data, SCADA data, and a business rules engine to identify the health and risk of assets in the substation, and then to govern the rules, right, the maintenance policies associated with those assets. And they've had tremendous success, having 10 to 30% reduction in maintenance and replacement costs, and up to 40% labor savings. And essentially, they're getting all this through the automation capabilities, through the governance capabilities, and through the AI insights about the condition of the asset. So they've moved from time and calendar-based maintenance to condition-based and reliability-centered and risk-based maintenance. Tremendous success there. I'm going to jump over to Encore, right next door to Red Electrica here, and talk about vegetation management. Encore is using our massive geospatial data sets that we host in the cloud to understand the state of the grid as it relates to vegetation. And the way utilities do vegetation management today is they do it on cycles, every 3 years, every 5 years. They may come through a neighborhood or go into a part of the transmission network, and they drive down the line and they cut back where they need to cut back. And it's all done, in a visual way, and it's very manual intensive. And using a vegetation management solution, they're able to prioritize which sectors, segments, if you will, in the grid to trim. And so they've gone from cycle-based trimming to more of a condition-based trimming strategy. And that's really helped their SAIDI by 9%, and so improvement there, and a 7% reduction in vegetation management spend, which is quite significant when you think about the tens of millions of dollars utility spends on vegetation management. Let's move on to energy systems. I'm going to talk about two related to the load forecast use case that I mentioned earlier. The first here is a North American electric utility. They have a flex customer program. So these are those demand response programs that are critical for participation by the customers to help out during peak demand events. So this is a demand side management use case. And what we did with this utility is we worked with them, understood the demographics of their customers, and primarily we're talking about C&I customers here, right? So commercial and industrial customers, to identify which programs, which flex programs would be most appealing to that particular business. And then within that program, what rate incentives should be offered. And so this machine learning program was able to provide a more accurate segmentation of the customers that would benefit from the Flex program, and a very conservative estimate of roughly $12 million in annual savings. And we think that those numbers are actually quite low in this particular case. And then going off to the far right, it's a project that I'm close to myself personally, is a peak demand prediction. So we're working with a cooperative, right? So this is a generation and transmission cooperative in North America. And what happens is when they have a peak demand event, they are initiating different load control strategies, like controlling the thermostat at somebody's home or business, or controlling the hot water heater. And essentially, they're turning down those thermostats. They're turning down the temperature on the hot water heater. And one of their challenges was load fatigue, load control fatigue, where the consumers were really getting frustrated. They didn't want to participate anymore. And so what we did is we worked with them, leveraging weather data, leveraging load data, and created a more accurate peak prediction window from 1 to 6 hours down to 1 to 2 hours. And we reduced the number of calls or demand side management initiatives by 35 to 40% a year. So they were doing roughly 4 to 6 events a month. We got them down to under 3, and in many cases under 2. We have a next phase of the project going on right now to improve decision making around dispatching of battery storage as another way to offset the peak. Thinking about customer, I always like to talk about Endesa. They're also in Spain. They're using conversational AI to not only improve the customer experience, but also the agent experience. And you know, we think of that as something we call the intelligent energy advisor. How can we take a call center agent and make them very knowledgeable on new offerings, new business models, new technologies that could help their customers, right? So using an agent assistant not only improves average handling time, but it also allowed the agent to be a revenue generation for that utility. And then on the self-service side, you know, we all can see the benefits of call deflection for some of those most common type events like move in, move out, billing inquiries, and billing payments. Many customers would prefer to do that through an app, through a chatbot anyway. So our AI has been very successful in enabling their business. And then I'm going to go over to the far right and talk about ENN Group. What's interesting about ENN Group is they're using the same Watson technology, not only for their call center operations, but also for their IT operations. And so, they're addressing questions coming from customers, from employees, and we're tying into the AI. We're also tying in a business process automation, and we're automating many thousands of tasks every day, and they're achieving a strong ROI. Very quickly, I want to talk about process mining and enterprise operations. We're working with a multinational European-based utility. They operate 19 sub-utilities utilities, right? There's actually 19 utility operations within this multinational organization. We worked with them on the procure-to-pay process. We did some data-driven discovery. We applied some AI and found deviations in their processes. We identified bottlenecks and non-conformance, which could be a liability as well. And then we ran some what-if scenarios to find opportunities to apply robotic process automation. So more than $417 million in total trap value, and 65% of the workflows or cases were non-conformant. 26% of orders were missing a purchase agreement, and 36% cost savings identified with just the invoice registration process. So tremendous value with process mining. We also offer a set of pre-built, out-of-the-box, I'll call them starter models or accelerators. You can see here, some of them are some of the use cases that I've already talked about, including demand response and customer micro-segmentation, are also known as green advocacy. But also the payment risk prediction is an interesting one that comes up and has come up quite often, in fact, due to the economic downturn associated with the pandemic. Very quickly, I just wanted to highlight, and this is not an inclusive list, but this is an example of the kinds of use cases and solutions that we bring to our utility clients. They're really across the board in terms of leveraging AI and also sustainability. So sustainability is a new area. We just acquired a company called envision, and they're helping us help our customers to achieve their sustainability goals through ESG reporting. So Rob, over to you.
Awesome. Let me turn my webcam on here. There we go. So, so thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Tayo. So we're going to get into the Q&A portion next. So last call for questions. Just type them in the chat box if you have any there. And I know that we were going to be stopping in about 45 minutes, but we can stick around to the hour to answer questions. We've got about 10 minutes left, but if you have to drop off, I completely understand. And thank you for attending today. So let me, while we're waiting for the last couple questions to roll in, let me first start with the most common question that we get. And in fact, I can see somebody has asked this already in the chat. And the question is, where do we start? How do we get on this path? Ultimately, the most important first step is awareness, both awareness of what is possible and where the industry is headed, and self-awareness of where your organization currently sits, what your current state is. So to this end, we have a two-step getting started process that, at least for now, we're offering at no cost. The first step is a candid executive level conversation. We facilitate a next steps discussion with an executive who is interested and might ultimately evangelize for automation-based organizational transformation. The follow-up to that is a high-level maturity and readiness workshop. It's and like any roadmap, it starts with a candid and realistic assessment of where your organization is starting from, with the goal of understanding the roadmap forward. Now, my contact info is on this slide. You'll get copies of this deck later, or you can use your phone right now to scan the QR code. So if this sounds like it's something that would be of interest to you or your organization, definitely please reach out and we'll get something scheduled. So now on to some questions. Next slide, please, Mitch. Although there's not much on it, just says questions. There was a second part of the where do we get started that I think is probably important. Tayo, can you speak a little bit to what these workshops would look like? Who would be there and what would be covered, that type of thing? And you may be on mute. Or maybe he has me on mute. Tayo, can you hear me okay? There we go.
Yeah, the organizer had me muted. So, sorry, repeat the question because I'm now lost. What's in the executive level workshops?
Yeah. So what would these look like? Who would be there? What kind of time commitment are we asking? You know, a little bit about the homework we ask people to do beforehand versus what's in the session itself.
Right. So typically it's 30 to 45 minutes. You know, most execs are busy and trying to get an hour is difficult. You know, you covered a couple items. It's about, you know, the readiness of the organization, a little bit of a roadmap and what I'd call awareness. You know, as we talked about in the presentation, it's great to jump onto the, hey, there's some cool stuff we could do, but there is some heavy lifting on the data side that needs to be in place in order to truly realize the benefits of infusing AI into the process. Part of it is as well helping from an ideation perspective. You know, number one issue that we've seen over the last 5 years, kind of RPA right into AI, is we see the potential, but we don't really know where to get started. And we also don't know how to build this out in a manner that we can scale. So a senior executive that would be directly sponsoring this and an organizational area that would be sort of the proof of concept or one of the early adopters, those would be people that we would want to have at the session. And we do typically ask that you bring a couple of use cases, ideas into that session, and we'll ideate and talk about them. Sometimes, frankly, they don't work, but it's not, oh, this is a bad idea. It's why this isn't an appropriate idea at this time. And so there's still learnings that come out of that. And sometimes it's a great idea, and then there's more conversation about here are the next steps that you would typically undergo to put this into motion.
Thank you. So another question, Mitch, this might be a good one for you, is in the context of AI and embedding it into processes, is there anything we should start doing immediately to prepare for that journey?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, there's opportunities to use data, right, to become more data-driven organization. And so when I'm looking at processes, where can data add value? Where can an insight add value? And I think the asset performance management use case is a great example of where, time and calendar-based maintenance is okay, but if you could keep reliability high by using the health, right, calculating the health score of the asset, would allow you to have more flexibility. You could defer maintenance where the health score is quite good, or if the health score is quite low, you could take action sooner before a failure. So a lot of the process work and analysis would be to identify, where can I use data to make a decision and to initiate an action. And I talked a little bit about process mining. That's another way, to uncover gaps in the process where automation could be leveraged more intelligently than just saying, well, that's a manual process, I'm going to, automate it. I don't think that's enough to get the biggest bang for the buck.
So there's another related question here, Mitch, where somebody mentions they're in a conservative company, they have a conservative executive, and saying, how long until AI is mature enough for that company to get started, and when should they really be expecting to get started and get some movement? So immediately, right? May not be AI right away, but get going immediately. Now, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, look, it's okay to get started small, right? I'm a big believer of starting with what we call minimum viable products or solutions. Work with a subset of your data. You don't have to operationalize the AI right away, but doing experimentation is important, I think, to figure out what you know and what you don't know. Data quality is the number one objection I hear to moving forward with AI, besides a conservative culture. But I say you won't know what your data quality issues are until you start to apply the machine learning to that data, and then you'll know more about it. So experimentation is high on the list. We have programs that we can bring to your customers, Rob, to initiate 6 to 8 week MVP programs to identify opportunities for uncovering insights from the data, and then explore the next step, which could be operationalizing that use case.
Awesome. Tayo, I like this one. This one's kind of near and dear to my heart. Any examples of successful ideation generation activities? We had one that came up recently, and would you like to speak to it? The genesis for this presentation, actually.
Well, I think if you're referring to the one that we actually had in the presentation, that literally came from the client noodling about, hey, they reached out to other departments in their organization, and they really had a focus on trying to bring it down to the grassroots level, frontline workers, and asking them for great ideas or observations to come back to the organization to say, hey, this is broken, or this doesn't work, or why can't we do this? And so that example was literally part of the conversation that we had, where they went through the process and they looked at all these areas and said, this makes a lot of sense, and why am I doing it? And the resource that's doing it is a fairly expensive resource. So that's the simplest example, but we have others where a very similar process. One of the things that we try and drive to is not just the use case that may be causing the irritation, but what are the ancillary and surrounding processes that touch that. And that provides an opportunity to look at, well, we don't just want to automate in one department, or let me rephrase that. We may not only want to automate in one department, because accelerating something in department A may just create backlog in department B. And so we want to look at what is the enterprise implications of accelerating something so we're doing it 10x faster, but have we triggered and improved the process from end to end? And so all of those things are part of that analysis phase that we want the customer to absolutely contribute to, but then ask some probing questions to make people think about other areas and other elements that oftentimes get forgotten. And we could go on for hours. We don't have hours, but you know, RPA was one of those scenarios in the automation space where lots of organizations ran out and started to build bots, and then quickly realized that governance and the downstream implications of all of that hadn't really been thought through, and their RPA strategies and programs were failing, and they needed to reel them back and put them inside of COEs and think about automation at the enterprise level, automation at scale, and then think about all these other nuances before they just ran forward. And then that sort of lays the foundation to infuse AI. I think Bill Gates said many years ago, automating a process that's broken just yields a worse process that spits out bad stuff faster. He didn't say it that way, but that was the gist of it. And so we really do want to look at opportunities to improve the process, augment human in the loop, et cetera, and also streamline the process at the same time. That was probably a really long-winded answer to your question. So.
Yeah, if you can't tell, Ty was very, very passionate about this. I was actually thinking, I'm going to be super quick because we're running out of time here, but I was actually thinking of a situation where we did a presentation to most of a company as a lunch and learn ideation generation exercise that, combined with a digital suggestion box, was really focused on trying to inform the workforce of the art of the possible and get real tactical ideas for the organization to increase efficiency and automate. So we have a couple more. We'll reach out to the folks individually who submitted those and get those answered for you, but we're out of time today. Really do appreciate everyone sticking with us right through to the end here. And Tayo, Mitch, thank you so much for the session today. It was very, very informative. So again, last chance to grab that shot of my contact info, but hope to hear from you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.